Welcome to Lesson 2 on Interactions and Interdependence. Let's start with SC4, which is to describe the role of decomposers. We're going to be watching the same video from last lesson. It's linked in SC4 for you, but this time you just need to skip ahead and start from 3 minutes 57, so you're starting from where you left off last time. If you want to just watch the whole video again, that's obviously no problem. As you watch it, you can fill in the answers to the questions, and if you can't find the answers in the video, you can always check the glossary for anything you missed. Here are the answers to SC4. Number 1, either bacteria or fungi, 1 mark for each. And number 2, decomposers will break down or recycle the organisms that they can decompose. That's 1 mark, so either break down or recycle for 1 mark. And then the second mark is so that these nutrients can be used again. So we're going on to SC5, which is how to draw a food web. So let's start by having a look at what a food web is. Well, a food web, although it looks complicated, is actually just lots of food chains all added together. So it shows all of the different interactions of who is eating who. Just like in a food chain, the arrows show the direction of the flow of energy. So for example, if a fox eats a mouse, the fox is getting the mouse's energy. So that's why the arrow is pointing from the mouse to the fox. And also, just like in a food chain, we call the plants at the bottom producers, then we call the first level of animals the primary consumers, and the second level of animals the secondary consumers, and so on. So in this box here, which is on the next page in your booklet, you're going to be drawing your own version of a food web. Now, you are perfectly welcome to look up examples on the internet rather than think up your own one. So it's fine to research on the internet and copy one down, or you can draw your own. Make sure that you draw proper pictures, label everything, and draw your arrows neatly. You could also colour it in. Moving on to SC6, which is to use keywords to describe the different organisms in our food web. So under the animal or plant, you need to label all of the labels that are listed. So producers, primary, secondary and tertiary consumers, apex predator or predators, and decomposers. I would recommend probably using different colours to label the different things in. So you could, for example, do all of the producers in green. So I'm just going to show you on an example from our booklet. So anything that is a plant is going to be a producer. And it's also going to be at the bottom of the food chain if it's been drawn properly, or food web. And then the next level up, so things like, for example, the grasshopper, that's going to be considered a primary consumer because it is the first thing to eat the producer, so it's a primary consumer. All primary consumers are also going to be herbivores or possibly omnivores, but they're definitely going to be an organism that eats producers or plants. Then if we are to go even further up the food chain, we might start finding things like secondary and tertiary consumers, and eventually we'll find things like apex predators. So you need to go through your whole food web and make sure that every organism on your food web, you have added those labels. Moving on to SC7, which is to label the different levels of a food web. So again, I'm going to show you on an example. So we call the different levels of a food web or food chain the trophic levels. And so at the bottom is the first trophic level containing all of the producers. From then on, it gets a little bit more complicated. So the next level, the second trophic level, needs to include all of the primary consumers. So it's not necessarily going to be a nice sort of straight line like I've done. So I'll try and divide up and show you. So there we go, because the deer, even though it's sort of drawn at the top there, it is actually a herbivore, it's only eating producers. So it's part of the second trophic level. So on your example, you can divide it up like this, but it might be easier to actually think about each individual organism and label each organism individually. So if we look at this fox, he is on the third trophic level, and we can check that by saying there's 1, 2 things below him, so he's the third thing in the food chain. Now, where it gets a little bit more complicated is some organisms, so for example the coyote here, the coyote has 3 things in front of it, so we could say it's on the 4th trophic level. But there are other paths you could follow, for instance, from the grass to the mouse to the coyote, where it's actually only on the 3rd trophic level. So there you can put 3rd/4th trophic level, because it depends which route you take. Once your food web is complete, can you please upload it to Shobi? If you go to week 2, and then you'll see an assignment called food webs, and if you could please upload your food web into obviously the assignment called food webs. On to SC8, which is to make predictions about the effect of changing one element of a food web on the rest of a food web. So this is just like what we did with food chains last lesson. So let's have a look at question 1, which is what will happen if all the squirrels die? So we obviously need to go and have a look at the food web that's relevant, which is the forest food web. So what I like to do is to put my finger over, don't actually cross it out like this, but put your finger over what has been eliminated, and then have a look at what's going to be directly affected. So the animal directly above it, so its predator, and then obviously as well it's any of its prey or the producers maybe that it eats. And those are the ones you want to comment about. Have a go at question 1 only, and then we'll go through the answer before you try 2 and 3. Okay, so I suggest you pause on here so that you can have a read through my answers. However, I've just gone for some of the most obvious ones. There are lots of other possibilities, so as long as what you have said makes sense, it's fine. So as long as you've talked about increasing or decreasing populations and you've explained your reasoning, then you can have the mark. But you do need 3 separate points for each mark. Okay, now you're ready to have a go at question 2 and 3. I'm not going to give you any help with this, but just apply what you've learnt from marking your first answer. Again, if you want to pause on here so that you can have a look through my answers, but once again, they are just the most obvious answers. There are lots of other possibilities, but as long as you've used that concept of increasing and decreasing populations and explained why they're going to increase and or decrease. And well done, you have completed lesson 2 on interactions and interdependence. Look out for lesson 3.